Oh, 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 oh. Oh no, it is working. Oh, okay. I looked at when I started talking and I didn't see the little audio meter going up and down, and I was like, "Uh-oh, I have a problem." But it was just moved. The audio meter was moved to the wrong place because I'm a moron. But of course, y'all already knew this. Welcome to how I use the First Responder Kit. There's this open source Microsoft SQL Server First Responder Kit that started years ago. I should have an anniversary date for this, but by all means, it is the single most important way that I do my job. We're going to start out in PowerPoint for only like 5 minutes, explaining the basics of what I do, and then we're going to switch over into a SQL Server running live workloads so that you can watch how I use the scripts in the First Responder Kit. Let's get started. So get my handy clicker out here, Brent Ozar, Microsoft Certified Master, which just means I've made a lot of expensive mistakes with SQL Server, and now I get to help other people avoid some of those same mistakes. I used to have your job, assuming you're like most of the viewers out on YouTube, assuming that you're a developer, systems administrator, database administrator. I got my start a long time ago, working for a hotel software company. And after working for a hotel software company, I ended up going to work. And before that, I worked in hotels and restaurants. Before that, I guess I worked in a hotel management company too, but worked for a hotel software company, then went to work for a wine and spirits company, among other things. And what happened all the time to me was someone would bring me SQL servers. It's like the worst kind of present. And they'd say, "Brent, here you go. We found this over in the corner. The entire company relies on this. We are counting on you to make sure that this thing stays alive." And I'm like, what kind of terrible, nasty thing is this? These days, I'm a little bit different. These days, I'm a consultant. These days, I parachute in and I have 48 hours to turn a server around from zero to hero. On day one in the morning, we take control of someone's SQL server. We look at it together over SQL Server Management Studio, over a remote desktop. We look at the indexes, the weight stats, the queries running against it, the application code. I'm rapidly asking all kinds of things to help the company get to the bottom of what the pain point is and help them understand what's the best way that their team is going to be able to solve these problems. I know when I was a database administrator, I like to think that the code is broken or the hardware's not good. But in reality, we kind of have to deal with the cards that we were dealt or play the cards we were dealt. And so my goal is to find what's the easiest way to make this thing work, or I like to say, make this pig fly. So I do all of that diagnostics in the morning on day one, typically like think 8 a.m. to noon kind of thing, or 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And during that, I use the first responder kit extensively. The scripts that I show y'all, the exact same scripts that we put out there for open source, is the same scripts that Brent Ozar Unlimited has been using for health checks for more than a decade. Now, a lot of it is in how you interpret the output of those, but really it's all about how you gather that data as quickly as possible. Then I break off, and on day one's afternoon and day two's morning, I go off and write the findings. Then on day two's afternoon, I deliver those findings back to the client, and I say, all right, here's what the problems are. Here are the ways that you can solve them. If you want to see examples of all of that, you can see it over at brentozar.com. Click consulting up at the top. The point of this is not to sell you on consulting. The point of this is to teach you how to use these scripts to analyze your own SQL servers. There are plenty of bad SQL servers out there. I am currently booking work out into mid-November. I have lots of stuff to do. I am not trying to hide my knowledge under a bushel. I want to teach you how to do the exact same kind of stuff that I do. So what I'm going to show you is the same way that I approach SQL servers using the first responder kit. We're going to start by looking at SP Blitz to do a server-wide health check. Then we're going to do a performance check with SP Blitz first. We're going to figure out what our server's top weight types are. Then we're going to try to figure out the query and index issues that are causing those weight stats or making the weight stats worse. In this class, I'm only going to be going forward through these 4 scripts out of the first responder kit. There are even more that I go to in my full day long, how I use the first responder kit class, which is free. You can go to my site, click training up at the top, sign up for the free stuff, and you can watch all of this. If you need to disconnect for some reason, there's a recorded version of me doing all of this same stuff, plus additional scripts that we're not even going to cover today. In my lab, we're going to be using a SQL Server 2025 instance running a workload against the Stack Overflow database. The goal of this class is not to teach you how to reproduce that workload, but if you're the kind of person who wants to put your SQL server, like a development SQL server, under stress so that you can see what kind of issues you're running into, you can go over to brentozar.com/go/workload where I teach you how to do that. In my fundamentals and mastering classes, I actually give you workloads to run against your own development SQL server and then test yourself. I show you how to solve those problems. You can watch me do it and then see if your results were the same as mine. During the course of the next couple of hours, you're going to uncover all kinds of things about your SQL server. Remember, these scripts, it's all about uncovering things with your SQL server so that you know what the problems are before they come back and bite you in the rear end. You're going to uncover all kinds of things that you didn't know were issues before. You're going to see mentions of all kinds of metrics that you didn't know were important. I can't teach you how to solve every problem today. Today's class is about how I use the first responder kit. I work really hard. That's not entirely true. I don't feel like I work that hard at all. But I work really hard to make the title of the session be exactly what it is inside the session. So right now I'm teaching you how I use the first responder kit. I'm not going to teach you what every warning in there means. I'm not going to teach you to how to solve every problem. But anytime you see on the screen, or and when I say the screen, I mean your screen. When you're looking at the first responder kit output and you see a URL on the screen, I jokingly say that that stands for you read, loser. But it's a URL, it's a website you're going to copy paste into your browser. I put a ton of work into those too. I put a ton of work into those URLs. If I don't have a good resource, I point you to the next best thing that I can find, always trying to keep it totally free. If I can get you to solve your problems for free, I am all about it. Copy those into your browser. Do not raise your hand in this class and say, Brent, what does that warning mean? I will, in front of everyone, pull your pants down by pointing you over at the URL, and I will tell you, you read, loser. You're going to have a whole lot of questions. Today's class is not about fixing your server's problems. I do have classes on the fundamentals and mastering where we do teach you how to do those things. Today's class is about finding the problems, and the first tool that we're going to use for our troubleshooting is SP Blitz. This was the first script that I wrote inside the first responder kit because people were constantly bringing me SQL servers, and these SQL servers were full of all kinds of pitfalls. It had systems administrators that I'd never heard of before, linked servers set up, triggers all over tables, wildly out-of-date patches. And the more that I've worked as a consultant, I run across the craziest configurations that you'd ever see. My goal is to be able to just run SP Blitz and instantly find out exactly what's going on that SQL Server's configuration to make sure that this thing is actually good and ready from production. I'll tell you a story about that line right there. When you come back from vacation, I had a good friend of mine who's one of the best DBAs I've ever met. This person did a really good job of making sure all their SQL servers were stable. He had all kinds of really cool PowerShell troubleshooting scripts that he could run and automatically do things like failover and availability group. But he was the only database administrator in the shop, and there were just a couple of other sysadmins and a handful of developers. And this database administrator went out on vacation, went to Mexico, made a big deal of making sure that he did not bring his cell phone with him. His boss was like, I need you to go take vacation and recharge. Dude came back from vacation in Mexico a week later, sat down at his desk, and everything was different. His hard-won configurations of his availability group were all completely vaporized. The availability group replicas were all gone. He was down to one production SQL server. And he's like, what in the Sam hell did y'all do while I was gone? And his manager explained. He said, well, 2 days after you left, production went down. And we couldn't figure out how to work your scripts or get the availability group working back in again. So we just went down to a single SQL server. And we couldn't get some stuff to work then, so we just made everybody sysadmin, and we don't really know what we changed in order to get everything back up and running again. Poor guy had to rebuild his whole entire environment from scratch, which thankfully, because he was really specialized in automation with things like PowerShell, wasn't terribly bad for him. But at least he could go run SP Blitz and figure out what was going on inside that environment. Most of my scripts, I work really hard in order to make them compatible. I've said I work really hard like 3 times now, and that is just utterly not true. I take more vacations than anybody I know. I'm literally getting ready to, as soon as I finish this webcast, I'm going to go pack. I have to pack a suitcase to be in Boston for like 10 days. I'm going to speak at SQL Saturday Boston, teach a pre-conference about cloud SQL servers. And then as soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to go hang out with a bunch of hard-drinking friends in Salem, Massachusetts for like a week. So I feel guilty saying I work hard because I also vacation really hard. But I kind of sort of work to make sure that the scripts work in Azure SQL DB and Amazon RDS SQL Server. SP Blitz does not, because SP Blitz relies on checking things inside a bunch of databases. Azure SQL DB does not support cross-database queries, nor does it support MS for each DB. So the rest of the scripts that we're going to talk about today work just fine in Azure SQL DB, just not this particular one. So let's go hop out and go take a look and see what this thing does. Switch over here and hop into, for the rest of the class, we'll be over here. Carl says you work smarter, not harder. I'm not even sure I believe that one. I'm not even sure I believe that I work harder. I'm going to pause my load test for now, just because I don't need my load test up and running. We'll come back to that. And I'm going to run SP Blitz with just no parameters whatsoever. SP Blitz, what it does is it looks at all kinds of configurations. Do you have backups? Do you have CheckDB running successfully? And it gives you a prioritized health check. The most urgent stuff shows up at the top. See how it says priority 1, then like 10s and 100s. The most urgent stuff is up at the top. These are the things that you need to focus on first. I jokingly say that stuff between priority 1 and priority 49 are the reasons why people get fired. Database administrators, developers, sysadmins do not get fired when the application is slow. In fact, when the application is slow, that's when you tend to get more resources. Takes a while, but your company will say, hey, maybe we should get you some training. Maybe we should bring a consultant in from the outside. It's not like they're going to promote you for having a slow application, but you're not going to get fired. Priorities 1 through 49 focus on outages, reason why you're going to lose data. You don't have backups. You don't have corruption checks. In the event of actual database corruption, those will show up here too. It is really tempting. I know you believe that you're doing a good job. It is really tempting to say this script must be wrong. It's really tempting to look at this, and when you see, if I tighten this up a little bit so that we can show more of it on the screen here when I zoom in, that you go, a backup's not performed. Master, what are you talking about? I back those up. What do you mean never? Your script must be wrong. Let me tell you a little story. So early on in my consulting career, I walked into a consulting company gig in downtown Chicago and planned on this gig long in advance. Most of the time when I go to clients, I just wear a t-shirt and jeans, the same kinds of things that you would see me at a conference at. And I always tell clients, if you need me to wear something else, just let me know what it is. I'll be glad to wear something else. So I go into this big fancy downtown thing, and I put my my jeans and t-shirt on, and I go down into this conference room, and I open the door, and it's this amazing, beautiful conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows, big, long wooden table with, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 people in there sitting around this conference room table, and they're all wearing suits and ties. And I was like, sorry, I've got the wrong conference room. And I go to close the door, and they're like, no, you're the SQL Server consultant. Come on in. We've been waiting for you. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I walk in, and we do the round of intros, and we have some people there who are database administrators, some people who are sysadmins, some people who are developers, some people who are managers. And I'm like, okay, tell me what's going on with the SQL Server. Let's talk about it first. Okay, we got that out of the way. Now let's go put the SQL Server up on the screen, up on the projector screen. Let's start by running SP Blitz. We run SP Blitz, and the very first line that comes out, boom, database corruption detected. It wasn't even that they didn't have CheckDB. Database corruption was detected. And immediately some of these people in suits are like, listen, you don't know what you're talking about. That's impossible. We have corruption checking jobs that run all the time. They would have alerted us if something was wrong. I love playing Columbo. Columbo was this TV detective who kind of played like he was dumb and stupid, and he didn't really understand what was going on. He wore this trench coat. His hair was always a mess. So I love playing stupid like Columbo. So I was like, oh, you're probably right. It's probably an error in my script. You said you've got those jobs that run all the time. Why don't you, let's pop open the history of those jobs, and let's just go take a look. So whoever's running the keyboard and mouse opens up SQL Server Agent. They right-click on the job. They go into history. And when the history display comes up, there's a whole list of times where it's run. And next to them, it's red X, red X, red X, red X, all the way down. It's just nothing but red X's as far back as the history went. All of a sudden, everybody sits up a little straighter in their chairs and they're starting to pay a little bit more attention. I said, no, it's probably just like an alerting problem or something. It's probably not a real failure. Why don't you go right click on that job, go in and look at its exact step history. Let's see what happened. And then all of a sudden they're like, this CheckDB job has been failing for months. And the notifications were hard coded to go to one employee. And I'm like, okay, so who's the employee? Is the employee in the room? No, he left us years ago. I'm like, okay, exactly. It's real easy when you're not getting failure emails to think that everything is working successfully inside your shop. That is not the case. Do not get that comfortable. That's the whole reason that SP Blitz exists, to make sure that we catch problems before they become, as someone said in the chat, resume generating events. That was William Meitzen there who said resume generating events. So in here, these no backups and CheckDB over 2 weeks old, these are really big deals. So for every one of these, it's totally fine if you don't know what they are, or if you want more help troubleshooting them. That's where the you read loser comes in, is that you copy paste that into your web browser. And for every one of these, there's an explanation of not just how you fix it, but also what diagnostic queries we're running in order to detect it. Because sometimes folks, for example, run third-party backup utilities that are doing dirty snapshots or crash-consistent snapshots that aren't successfully writing to the SQL Server logs about what gets backed up when. And we explain how to detect those kinds of things, why they're not really backups, what you should probably be doing instead, and much more. Now, right about now, if you have stuff between priority 1 through priority 49, it's really tempting to start working on fixing it right away. Don't do that. Today's class is about getting you a really clear picture of what's going on with your servers. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to your boss after this webcast finishes, and you're going to say, here are all the things that I learned recently about the SQL servers. I'm not asking for credit. This whole thing is open source. You can copy paste this and build your own health check reports. And many consultants in the community do exactly that. There are a lot of people in the community who use the first responder kit to build their own health checks, and then they sell them to other people. That's fine. I hope that all of you make a great living doing that kind of thing. That's wonderful. I do this and share it because I want your life to suck less. It certainly helps me suck less with my life. Now, you can't just, if you copy paste this into an Excel spreadsheet, nobody's going to pay you for that. Pretty quickly, they're going to go, Brent Ozar URLs, and they're going to start copy pasting and asking questions about that. Clean it up a little, make it a little nicer output. One way that you can do that is with the output type parameter. If I say output type equals markdown, some of you might have used markdown before. It's a way of putting text together in kind of a visually pretty way. Richie says in the chat, I'm going to go to my boss after this and let me build my own first responder kit. How hard can it be? When I do it, when I dump it out to Markdown, there's a cell right here. I can click on that cell, and when I click the cell, it gives me a text version of this. This is really useful for copy pasting into an email, copy pasting into Stack Overflow questions, into SQL Server Central questions. And you can delete out the stuff that you don't want the public to see. I really love Management Studio, this scroll bar thing that'll give you a little preview of the document going down the side there. It's in settings. You can turn that on. So then I can scroll down through the side of this. And then like, for example, if there's something in here that I don't want people out in the public to see, like if I have my sysadmins, if I'm running SQL Server under service accounts, whatever, and I don't want that to show up. If I want to take my company name out of here, things like that, then I can delete that out of here. So that's very useful. Another thing that you can do instead of outputting it to Markdown is I can say SP Blitz output database name equals, let's say we'll put it in master, output schema name equals DBO, and then output table name equals Blitz results. When I do this, it's going to go build that table if it doesn't exist. This is super useful for those of you who want to centralize your reports across lots of SQL servers. So I can say, after it runs, I can say select star from master DBO blitz results. And what this does is it adds a couple of columns. You got server name over on the left-hand side and check date, plus you've got all the regular outputs of SP Blitz. This is really useful if you want to run SP Blitz on a scheduled basis. Like say you want to run it once a month so that if someone asks you what changed on the SQL server, you'll have a better idea of what changed over the course of time. Another thing that's really useful with this, some people do it as an agent job on startup too as well. Another thing that's really useful for this is, I don't know about you, but it's really hard to get a raise as a database administrator. At least it was hard for me to get a raise because my boss would say at the end of the year, or they'd say in like August, okay, Brent, it's time for your annual review. What did you do this year? And then I'd be forced to go back through like help desk tickets and emails trying to figure out what it was that I'd done over the course of a year. Well, we're data people, right? We have data. If you run SP Blitz to a table once a month across each of your SQL servers, you can then centralize that and say, with a group by query, you can say, well, at the beginning of the year, I had 12 SQL servers and I had 432 urgent warnings from SP Blitz. Now, at the end of the year, I've got twice as many SQL servers, and yet I've managed to cut the number of warnings from SP Blitz down from, say, an average of 60 per server down to an average of 20 per server. And then that way I can put some real numbers behind that and see boss, I'm managing twice as many servers. This is why you should double my salary. And of course, they're going to laugh at your face, but then it makes your 10% raise request seem a whole lot more reasonable, as opposed to if you just say you want 10% and you can't say what you did, then you're kind of SOL. One thing I would note if you're doing that kind of approach, if you're dumping SP Blitz to a table, which is also useful if you're a consultant and you're doing health checks across groups of servers for a client. If you're going to check SP Blitz over time, just make sure that you only focus on the most urgent issues, the stuff like priority 1 through 49. Call them high priority issues, things that would get me fired. The number of things that would get me fired has gone down dramatically because there's going to be a lot of stuff in SP Blitz that you can't control. Let's go back into there. Some of you probably have, for example, there's a warning in here, stored procedures with recompile. You may not have control over that. You may have things like heaps inside the databases, stored procs with recompile, lots of linked server users, whatever it is. So if you have databases that you can't control, another useful parameter is SP Blitz. Check user database objects equals 0. And this turns off the checks that run on a per database basis, looking inside of the database to see if there's something that the developers or third-party vendors are doing. If you have third-party vendor apps that you can't control, this is useful if you just want to look on the outside and say at the server level what's going on. Now, you'll still get per database advice. For example, if you're crazy enough not to back up your databases, then you're still going to get per database advice there, but we're not looking inside the user databases. One other thing that I would warn you about is that I try to have everything in here be something that truly bit me in the rear end. I don't want to give you advice about a problem if it's not something that you need to solve. So some of you right now are probably going, Brent, I don't back up my system databases like master, model, and MSDB because I'm not going to fail them over in the event of a disaster. Oh, I hear you, but here's the thing. I'll tell you another story about one of those particular lines, not backing up your system databases. I was at a client, and the first thing we start with was running SP Blitz. And they said, yeah, we don't back up our system databases. Well, also, SP Blitz warns further down if you have user level tables inside those databases, like if somebody had created stuff inside of master model or MSDB. And at this particular client, there were tables scattered out through master. And they said, oh, that looks like it's just the result of a failed deployment. Somebody probably just didn't change into the right database before they went in and ran their create table statements. I said, okay, that sounds totally legit. Let's check that. Let's go look at this table, for example, called user accounts. And it was called something like user accounts, not that exactly. And the next thing you know, we're looking in this user accounts table, and it's had things like username, password, and the date the account was created. And they had accounts that were created that day. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know where to begin with all the problems that we have here. So first off, you are using this table. You are storing your user accounts in here. You are creating users today and putting them in this table, which means that they're not being backed up. And you didn't do this, or you didn't know that. And if you would have failed over to another server, you'd be completely screwed. I said, but also, can I just ask you, why are you storing user passwords in clear text? Like, why is it unhashed inside? You, as an application designer, you should never store passwords in clear text. And I said, and as a result, I want to show you what my own password is. And because I had a password on that site, and I scrolled down, I did a query, where's my user account at, showed it to him. And the password was chock full of swear words. It was just completely unprintable, really obscene. And I said, the fact that we're laughing at this means you could see people's back. You can't do this to your users. I said, and also at the time, I happened to be really pissed off at whoever was in the purchasing department when I created that user account. The stuff that you see in here is all from real world experiences that I've had where people have been burned by stuff. So start with SP Blitz, and it gives you this really nice overall high-level health check. We've talked about a bunch of the parameters that I use. There's one other parameter that's really useful, and that is for consultants. And you can use these in combination with each other too. Check server info equals 1. What check server info equals 1 is if you go way down to the very bottom of the SP Blitz results, is you'll also have a set of server information with things like the number of CPU cores in it, the amount of disk size, how long it's been since the last restart. All this stuff is things that are useful to consultants who are having to parachute in and check out all kinds of SQL servers on a random basis. All right, so that right there is the most important set of parameters for SP Blitz. If I had to teach you the most important stuff, I would stop there. But because you're also going to be using this for the rest of your life, there are a few other things you want to know. Things that you're not going to use today, but you're probably going to use a few weeks or months from now. So I'm going to go refresh my list of stored procedures. I'm going to go to SP Blitz, and I'm going to run modify. SP Blitz is open source. What that means is that you can read it. Well, it means a lot of things, but one of the things that it means in terms of T-SQL scripts is it means that you can read it. It means that you can open this up and actually see all kinds of stuff that it's doing. I don't expect you to go through the 5,000 lines of T-SQL that's in this thing, but if you want to know more stuff that it does, it has a whole ton of other functionality. For example, if you're only worried about priorities 1 through 49, you can have it just output those. There's an ignore priorities above and below so that you can say, I don't want anything over priority 49. I just don't want to see that stuff because I don't care about it. There's also things like output XML as var and varchar. Sounds kind of weird, but if you want to run this across linked servers will blow chunks if you try to drag XML data across them. The workaround for that is instead of dumping it out as XML, we can put it out as nvarchar. If you want to, for example, alert when jobs are owned by anyone other than SA, excuse me, but you use a different account for your agent jobs, like let's say that you put them all under Phyllis, then you can put in, here's the account that I expect my jobs to run instead of SA. All kinds of stuff inside here. If you want to know what a parameter does, you can copy paste it out and then do a control F in there to go find it, and you'll see where it's used inside the code. I say that because on the other end of this, those of you who like to ask for support help, the people who are involved in SP Blitz First and the rest of the First Responder Kit are all volunteers. We are volunteering our time to help you. I use it as part of my job. I want it to help you, but I don't want you to go, Brent, how is Babby formed? Open up the code if you've got a question about the code and go look first. Because I'll tell you what, I got a full-time job and I have not memorized the contents of SP Blitz. So if you're going to ask me how something works, odds are my very first thing that I'm going to do is go poke in here and go figure out how it works. Because I don't remember that stuff either. Next up, and Brian, in a very related thing, says, how can I help? I almost Googled Brian how, but that's not what I'm trying to do. SQL Server, First Responder Kit, GitHub. In the GitHub repository, you're an unusual, oh, well, let's play a capture together. What squares are motorcycles? That's a motorcycle. What squares are buses? That's a bus. Okay, what else? You going to hit me with anything else? Okay, no, good. If we go to the First Responder Kit, so the First Responder Kit repo, there's something in here, if you scroll down, that you've probably heard of before, just never actually looked at. It's called the documentation. The documentation. So there's lots of documentation in here, including how to install the scripts, how to get support. So if we come down on here, how to install the script, how to get support. When you think you found a bug, or you, and it sounded like when I said, my tone of voice made it sound like when I said, when you think you found a bug, that sounded sarcastic, like you would never find bugs. People find bugs all the time. All the time. I'm totally comfortable with it. I am not one of those people who believes that my code is perfect, especially if you give me a repro script and you say, if you run this, here's the output and it's incorrect. By all means, read the contributing file and it tells you how to give back to the project. It's not that we're looking for volunteer coders, but if you come in with an idea and you say, hey, Brent, it would be really cool if SP Blitz did this, you are expected to do that code. The open source does not mean free consulting. It means that if you want to build something, we'd love the pull request, but we're not currently like soliciting ideas. We have plenty of ideas we already have out there. It's the challenge is we actually have to code it. And then there are issues and pull requests out here. I don't remember. Oh, look at that. That's true. I have to work on correctly filter out new indexes. Oh, that's interesting. Modifications made before update. Yep, love all of those. I got to go through my pull requests and work on those. But this is totally open source. You can get it either through brentozar.com or you can also get it through the releases over on GitHub. And we put out releases about every 3 months, about once a quarter. Okay, so that is SP Blitz. SP Blitz does an overall server level health check. This is the kind of thing that you run when you first take over a SQL server. You're probably not going to need to run it very often after that. Maybe you run it as an agent job to dump it to tables once a month. But it's not like as soon as you get a help desk ticket about a server that you're going to jump to this first for performance tuning issues. we are going to take a 5 minute, make sure I got a 5 minute button on here, a 5 minute bio break. And when we come back from the 5 minute bio break, we're going to look at the tool that we use to diagnose performance issues first. So 5 minute bio break, and I'll see you back in here. All right, let's see here. Did it? There, good. There we go. Microphone worked. All right, so the next script that we're going to go take a look at is when we have a performance issue. Let me tell you a little bit about the life of a consultant. As a consultant, I am usually booked some period in advance, usually like 2 or 3 weeks in advance. At the moment, I work much further in advance. It's like November through December, I'm starting to book stuff for. So it's not really good for me if a client goes, hey, we got an emergency right now. Hey, can you remote desktop? I know you're probably busy, but we got a performance emergency on the SQL Server. Can you take a look? Can you just go take a look? I can't usually drop everything and just immediately go, hey, let's go take a look at the SQL Server. So the SP Blitz first is a query that I wrote in order to have queries or have clients run this first against their SQL servers if they thought there was a SQL Server problem. I wanted them to run it first. And yes, I recognize the irony that I'm calling something SP Blitz first when it is not the first query that I am running right now, but it's the first query that I want you to run right now when there is a performance emergency happening on the server. It used to be called SP Ask Brent, but that's ended up being a little bit vain over time. So what this does is it takes a snapshot of a bunch of DMVs, things like perfmon counters, wait stats. It waits for 5 seconds, takes another snapshot of those DMVs, and then does a diff across those two to see what changed in that time, like what perfmon counters went up, what wait stats went up, etc. It does not start a profiler trace. It doesn't start an extended events trace. All it does is do a diff between a few sets of tables and run some quick analytical queries to see what's going on. And one of my favorite things inside there is this row right here, no problems found, because I wanted it that if someone ran it, they go, oh, you know what? It turns out it's not a database problem. The database is okay. If there's not anything going on the SQL Server right now, just return no problems found and call it a day. Now, the reality is, being a database administrator, they probably are still going to call me and tell me that it's a database problem, but at least I've got this down there so that it kind of slows them down. And for me, too, that I go, okay, what does SP Blitz first say? Oh, it says there are no problems found? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and have this next shot at tequila and then go ahead and come back in and take a look at the VPN here in a minute. So let's go ahead and let's put it under pressure, though, to make it a little bit more realistic. Let's put our SQL Server under pressure, and then let's go run it again. I'll let my load test fire up here and run a couple of queries out there, and then I'm going to go over and run SP Blitz first again. Now, SP Blitz first, I said, takes a snapshot of a bunch of DMVs, waits for 5 seconds, takes another snapshot. It can take longer than 5 seconds to run. If your CPU's on fire, SP Blitz first is in line with everybody else trying to use CPU, so you may end up seeing it take some time. And then what it does is it gives you a prioritized list of reasons why, not that the server's unhealthy, but reasons why we think the SQL Server is slow right now. So for example, with this particular SQL Server, we believe it's slow because the data files in here are responding really slowly. That is also resulting in parallelism waits and page IO latch waits. And if you want to read more about each of these, there's that URL column. There's also diagnosis in here. You see this click to see details column? What happens if we click to see details on those slow data file reads? It says, and I'm going to zoom in a little so you can see it, your server is experiencing page IO latch waits due to slow data file reads. This file is one of the reasons why. This file on disk, we tried to read from it 3,000 times during this sample. Each time that we tried to read from it, it's taking 337 milliseconds on average, whereas Microsoft will guide you towards it should be happening in 20 milliseconds or less. That is an insane amount of diagnostics in 5 seconds. All this stuff just popped up inside a 5 second time span. That is bananas. If you want to find out why a SQL server is slow right now, this is one of the easiest ways to do it. Right here, that's where the pinpointed problem is. Our storage isn't responding fast enough, at which point, if we start reading through the diagnosis explanations here, maybe we solve that with index tuning or with query tuning as well. But this tells us what our top server's wait types are as well. Those of you who do wait stats analysis, that certainly includes me, will give me the wait stats during that time span. For example, my top wait there, it says that for 3,000 seconds over the last 5 seconds, SQL Server was waiting on this particular bottleneck. Now, those of you who follow me on TikTok will know that I was just complaining about how bad my math was today, that my high school teachers told me, you shouldn't use calculators, you should solve every problem manually. If you rely on calculators, you're not going to be any good at math. They were correct. I am terrible at math. I heavily rely on calculators. So when you see numbers like this out of here, it's very tempting to go, Brent's math must be terrible. But no, this is actually true. Because remember, your SQL Server has multiple CPU cores in it, each of which can be trying to run multiple queries at the same time. So it is normal to see wait stats go way higher than clock time. It is normal to see on a heavily loaded SQL Server thousands of seconds of wait time inside, say, a 5-second sample. Now, SP Blitz First is really useful in situations like this when you're trying to figure out why the SQL Server is slow right now. It's also useful for people who are not sysadmins or not database administrators to run. Like if, say that you've got someone on call who's not a database administrator and they know that performance is bad, you want to be able to empower them to run this and dump the results to table for you. Output database name equals master, output schema name equals DBO, output table name equals blitz first results. So what this will do, if they're getting complaints that the SQL Server is slow right now, they can log this to table so that when you're back, you can go back and troubleshoot it. It gives you a little bit of a time travel type thing. Now, Christopher asks a fantastic question that is exactly related to what I was about to say. So Christopher says, are the database permissions required to run the scripts documented anywhere? I wonder where we would find stuff like documentation. I wonder if it would be in that place that I linked to earlier that says documentation. I wonder if it says anything inside there. I wonder if we do a Control F for permissions. I wonder if, and of course it is sadtrombone.com. So that actually just means that I need to copy it over from somewhere else because I'll tell you where it actually is. So we'll say brentozar.com, ask Brent. On the old documentation page, which I just haven't ported over to GitHub, it has how to grant permissions to non-DBAs. Okay, so with anything SP Blitz related, not just SP Blitz First, but anything SP Blitz related, it all relies on sysadmin level permissions. So the ability to do stuff at sysadmin level. And you don't want to give sysadmin level permissions to the help desk. I know you, because you don't trust the people at the help desk. However, there's a really easy fix for that, as shown here in the documentation. What you do is you create a certificate, you grant that certificate a login, then you grant control server permissions to that login you just created. Right here, people are like, oh God, no, what do you mean control server? This login can't be used by people. You can't use this to log in interactively. This certificate's permissions are just used when you say add a signature to whatever stored procedure you use using this certificate with this password, and you're the only one who keeps this password when you create the certificate and when you add the certificate to the stored proc. So what's cool about this is that you give the control server permissions to the certificate and sign the stored proc. That means that anyone has the ability, when anyone has the ability to execute this stored proc, they are acting like sysadmins inside of that stored proc, but that's it. So this is so cool because it lets you grant them, like help desk people, the ability to run the code that you want. I'm okay with them running this code. As a database administrator, I'll give you another example. I gave my help desk permissions to kill queries using one of my stored procedures. I wrote a stored procedure to kill a query. It took a parameter of what was the SPID or what was the application name or what was the login name. They could pass in any of those. I would log to a table. Here's what they're trying to kill. Here's how long it's been running for. Here's the query plan. Here's the account of the person who's trying to do the killing. I could log all that to a table and then go kill the queries so that way, if there were questions later, I could say, here's who did it and here's why they did that. So really useful. Erlen Summerskog's post gives you much more details on the security internals of that. So this works beautifully for giving people the ability to do all kinds of mastery level stuff that you would normally never want to give them. I am also a huge fan of complete transparency with my developers. I'm not just saying that because Richie, my developer, is in on the call in the YouTube channel, in the chat comments. But because I want the developers to be able to see what's going on the SQL Server. If my developers have a question about, hey, is the SQL Server slow right now? I want them to be able to see the output of SP Blitz first so that they know where the problems are coming from. Because the more transparent we can be, the more likely it is that they're going to actually change the code that's causing these kinds of problems. Okay, so this is really useful. This technique of giving people the ability to run this and then go log it to a table is really useful. Some people also put this in an agent job and run it periodically, like every 15 minutes, so that way you could go back in time and go see why the SQL Server was slow last night at, say, 6 p.m. If you're going to do that kind of thing, you're what I would call an expert. SP Blitz First has an expert mode. Expert mode equals 1. So if I say, Richie says, if I'm a fan of transparency, then why do I keep Richie locked in an underground bunker? Richie, that's just Orlando. Orlando is it's for everyone's safety. So you'll notice when I ran SP Blitz First with expert mode turned on, that ended up producing a whole bunch of more results. This is not what I give the help desk or other developers. This is when I want to see all kinds of other metrics about what's going on. When I run SP Blitz First, this is usually how I do it. The first result set in SP Blitz First expert mode, the first result set is the list of queries that are running right now. You remember when I said SP Blitz First takes a snapshot of a bunch of stuff, waits for 5 seconds, takes another snapshot. Well, what I'm doing here is right before I take the first snapshot, I'm dumping out the list of queries that are running right now and their plans and their logins and all kinds of stuff, so that if I want to do some troubleshooting while I'm waiting for 5 seconds for the rest of this to roll out, I can go get a rough idea of what queries are running right now. Christopher says, petition to rename this to Brent mode. I do try to be more neutral these days just because I want consultants to be able to use it. And it would be bad for a consultant if they go, okay, now if you don't mind, I'm going to run this diagnostic thing with Brent mode turned on, because then all their clients are going to say, well, who's this Brent? And why aren't we just paying Brent directly? No. I don't want your clients. I kind of want to keep this a little bit anonymous so that you can have your own clients and make your own good living while I make a good living from you. But teach the teacher kind of thing. So the first result set is that list of queries that are already running. The second result set is that what I call the headline news result set, which is the list of things that we think your SQL Server's slow right now before. MetaJohn says Brent is way more expensive. That is true too as well. I don't work for peanuts like you do. Then the next result set is weight stats. So this is where I spend most of my time doing performance tuning, is I want to know what the top server's top weight types are during that time span and what I'm going to do about those weight types. We teach you much more about solving those in the Mastering Server Tuning class. Then we also give you file counters too as well. Like I can tell you which data files have had the most reads during that time span, how much reads we've done to them, and how long they've taken to respond. All of this extra stuff that's available in expert mode, you can write to table as well. If we go back to that D word that you're utterly terrified of, documentation. If we go back over to that documentation that you're so terribly afraid of, there is a set of instructions on SP Blitz first. We'll go down to that. They are in alphabetical order. Here we go, logging SP Blitz first to tables. This gives you the stack here of the Blitz first results, the file stats, the perfmod stats, weight stats, Blitz cache, Blitz who, and so forth. Now, you only want to run this every 15 minutes max. There's actually stuff in there that's hard-coded to a 15-minute level. I don't want you running it any more frequently or less frequently than every 15 minutes. And some of you, that's immediately going to produce a couple of questions, so let's talk about them. One of the questions it's going to produce is that why don't you let me run it more often? If you want to run it more often, what you want is a third-party monitoring tool. I don't care which one you buy. I don't care whether you use Redgate SQL Monitor, whether you use Idera's or Redgate SQL Monitor, Idera SQL DM, SolarWinds, SQL Sentry, Quest Spotlight. To me, they're all kind of the same. They all cost around about $1,000 per monitored server. Right about now, you're like, $1,000? Brent, that's a lot of money. Let me remind you of what SQL Server costs. SQL Server is $2,000 per core for Standard Edition, $7,000 per core for Enterprise Edition. Eclipse says Aqua Studio. I've never even heard of that, so it may be fine. I've just never heard of it. The ones that I listed are the big four there. So I don't care which one of those you use. They're all industry standards. They are all fairly well tuned for real-time diagnostics gathering. They have nice database repositories. They have beautiful front ends that you can jump back and forth all over time so that you can see why the server was slow at exactly 5:37 a.m. this morning. At about $1,000 a server, those are the best ways to monitor SQL Server. For out of the first responder kit, I don't use SP Blitz first for monitoring. Generally, I have the weirdo consulting job where I have to parachute into client servers and I have to fix them right away. And I don't have the luxury of any repository of history. I am facing like performance problems that are an emergency right now. If you're dealing with the luxury of troubleshooting over time, same servers over a long time, I would recommend one of the four utilities that I mentioned there. They seem to be the ones that people have the most success with. I will say that there are plenty of others out there. There's stuff like Datadog, New Relic, Amazon Performance Insights. There's all kinds of other stuff. If you use something else, just make sure to get a demo and training on it first, ideally on your own servers. I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen someone sit through a good demo somewhere of some other company's servers, and then they went and installed it on their own servers, and they're like, okay, now what? How does this work? I don't want to read the manual, because we already really know how y'all feel about documentation, right? Read it. That's why we're here. So you can dump this out to table every 15 minutes if you want to, and the parameters are in there. When you dump it out, you get all of the contents of all these cool result sets. You also get delta views so that you can query the differences between these tables over time, so that you can see, for example, what was happening on your SQL server at say 6:37 p.m. last night. So those are the big two combos of parameters, either SP Blitz first by itself or expert mode. The one other parameter that I use a lot on here is when I'm dealing with a troubleshooting an issue, a 5-second time span is not very long. I might catch like a sudden burst of activity or a sudden lull in activity. So when I'm troubleshooting live issues, I may take a longer sample. So I'll say at seconds equals 60, let's just say. So seconds equals 60 will give me, like you can guess, a 60-second sample instead of a 5-second sample. That's useful to see a longer period of time. Or if you're walking up to a SQL server that you've never seen before and you're having to troubleshoot it, and maybe it's not under any performance emergencies right now, but you want to get a picture of what it's like overall, and you haven't been logging to table, SP Blitz first since startup equals 1. I said that SP Blitz first takes a sample, waits for 5 seconds, takes another sample, and then compares those two. What this one does instead, I forgot to stop the 60-second sample. Let me stop that and then rerun this. What this does instead is it just takes a sample right now and it says, I'm going to assume that the beginning numbers are all 0. I'm going to get this thing since the dawn of time. And then that's really useful to see what your SQL server's top wait types have been since that server started up. And I need to explain a couple of numbers on here because they're not exactly intuitive. Hours sample and thread time. Hours sample. Anand says, will this work if SQL Server is at 100%? So let's go into Task Manager and go look over at our own processes here just to get a rough idea. So I did cancel the load test to bring it back down. But if I put it back under load, it'll run slower, just like any diagnostic query will run slower. So the two things that we got to look at here, hours, sample, and thread time. These are the two that are not very self-intuitive or not self-explanatory. Hours sample is how long of data we're looking at. Like in this case, the SQL Server's been up for about 30 hours. I want enough uptime to get a reasonably good idea of what the server's workload looks like. Like if it's only been up for an hour or two and we haven't been under load yet, that's not really a very good picture. If I'm running this on a Saturday right after I rebooted the SQL Server, it's probably not going to show me a very good clear picture of what's happening. At the same time, I don't want months of uptime because maybe we had a blocking issue 3 weeks ago. Maybe we had a horrible storage issue 2 months ago. I really don't want SQL Server to have more than like 2 or 3 months worth of uptime because that also tells me that people aren't patching. Every SQL Server version that's supported out there has had a patch in the last 60 days. Now, I'm not saying you have to apply the most recent patch all the time, but if they're bringing out patches every 60 days, that means you got to have an outage every 60 days. I don't care whether you're applying the most recent one or 2 patches ago or 3 patches ago, but you got to keep up because the reason why they put bug fixes out there is there are bugs in that software, including SQL Server. Golly, the newest 2022 had like a data corruption bug that I just found utterly hilarious. I'm even going to show it to you because I thought it was so funny. We're going to go to SQLServerUpdates.com, and we're going to go to the most recent cumulative update 21 for SQL Server 2022. And there was, this is really awesome. Fixes an issue in which doing a truncate table with partitions on a table with non-aligned partitions succeeds unexpectedly and causes corruption. Is that not one of the like 5 coolest words that you can read about a database engine bug? Succeeds unexpectedly and causes corruption. I love that. What they're telling you is that you shouldn't be able to truncate a partition table when there are non-aligned indexes on it. And in this case, though, unfortunately, SQL Server lets you do it, which means that it leaves data behind in some of the indexes, which I found absolutely hilarious. I love Microsoft for at least being honest about it. So it fixes a SQL injection vulnerability in a system stored procedure. What you want to know is, which one was it? Which stored procedure was it? And they do not tell you that. I would pay, I don't want to say good money, but I'd pay amusing money to know which one it was, just to see, because it would be so funny. I understand why they don't share it, because that's like giving people instructions on how to hack SQL Server, because y'all don't patch your SQL servers on a regular basis. But those are so awesome. So we'll come back over here to this. So our sample is how long the SQL server's been up. In this case, how much data we're looking at. Thread time is how long it's been running queries. Right about now, you're like, hold on, how does that work that it's higher than uptime? Well, remember, your SQL Server has multiple CPU cores, each of which can be running multiple queries with multiple tasks at the same time. Also, this is a little tricky because it includes parallelism. So if you have a query, let's say, to keep the numbers simple, say that it runs for 1 minute across 4 threads. That's 4 minutes worth of thread time, plus technically another minute for the parallelism coordinating thread. So you're talking 5 threads altogether. Eclipse says over in the notes, so that's why the numbers are so high. Eclipse says, what should be a good patching frequency? I want to see if mine is a good one. Okay, me personally, I don't like corruption. Me personally, not a fan of SQL injection. So when bugs come out, I want to fix those bugs. Me personally, as soon as the patch comes out, I am immediately going to put it in everywhere in my development environments. I'm going to put it in everywhere in my disaster recovery environments, let it soak in for, say, a week or two, then go promote it into high availability environments, and then up into production. But we just saw corruption bugs in SQL Server 2022 and SQL injection bugs. Why would you want to wait on that? Like, what would be, well, I better be sure. What are you going to be sure of? You have no testing program. You have no formal monitoring on your SQL servers to know whether any of this stuff is going on. It's like that they think that it's just going to, it's aging. I can kind of, oh yeah, I hear it aging. Oh, I think it's going to sound good in another 2 weeks. 2 weeks sounds, well, maybe 3 weeks sounds about right. No, we're just making numbers up. As long as you're making numbers up, you're pi 42. Put the patches out when they come out. That's my personal feeling. And you can tell I feel passionate about that there. Now, but of course, I'm showing you the reasons why you do that, because those bugs are kind of horrific. So that is our sample and thread time. The higher that thread time is going, that tells you the harder that the SQL server is working. Eclipse says, true, but I want to see if people complain. Eclipse, people will always complain. People always complain, Eclipse. Eclipse, you are a young, sweet, innocent, naive child, but I have bad news for you. They will always complain. Steve is also. Steve, oh my God, come on, this is ridiculous. Steve says, I've been using SQL Server since 1995. Microsoft has only hosted one SP that I know of. Steve, what you just said is you don't know very much. There was a cumulative update that completely broke availability groups, failed your ability to fail over from one to the other. There was a cumulative update that broke no lock. Your queries with no lock started taking out locks. There was a stored procedure, an infamous stored procedure that had to be completely rolled back. It was like SP3, and then they renamed it. The new one is SP3A. There have been so many broken cumulative updates out there. Steve, don't say that you only know of one. That just means that you're not subscribing to SQLServerUpdates.com, where I tell you when they're broken. Also, though, Steve, you've been working with SQL Server since 1995. Grandpa, it's probably about time to retire. You could, well, Grandpa, though, I do like that you're still learning, though. I do like that quite a bit. That's actually nice. Richie says, I still use SQL Server 6.5. You and Randolph West. Tripp says, years ago, we'd patch QA, wait a week, patch dev. You would patch QA before you patch dev? I'd be curious to see why that is. It just seems odd to me. Then up to production, so that's interesting there. Okay, cool. Byron says 7.0 rules. I lived through 7.0 in 2000, and I don't ever want... Like, we take for granted how good DMVs are. They're utterly fantastic. Okay, so back over here on this. Those are your most important parameters in there for SP Blitz first. Mike M says, you guys have test environments? You guys are getting paid? I love that meme. So that's SP Blitz first. Typically, what you're going to do most likely when you're looking at performance on a SQL server in your own environment, you are going to run sense startup in order to get an idea from what the top weights are in your environment sense startup. The next thing that you're going to want to know is what's causing those weights. What are the performance things that you need to focus on? Now, if you slide across over to the far right-hand side, there is over here a URL for each of these weight types. And this goes over to Paul Randall and Kimberly Tripp's excellent weight stats library over at SQL Skills, where they've got pages on every weight type out there. And they give you the technical definitions of what that is. In my Mastering Server Tuning classes, we teach you how to fix those weight types, whatever the top weight types are on your system. We teach you how to fix it with a mix of query tuning, index tuning, and so forth. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to find the queries that are causing those weights and the indexes that are also related to those weights. And after our next bio break, we'll take another 5-minute bio break. We'll go in and look at those. So I'll see you back in here in 5 minutes. And now, of course, the way that the world works is I have an emergency call from a client where I'm going to have to jump in and work with them. But I have about 5 minutes before I jump in and go do that. So I'm going to give you a quick peek at where I want you to go next. So if you go to, so that you can continue this class for free on your own. So if you go to brentozar.com, up at the top, click training. If you go to brentozar.com and up at the top, click training, there are fundamentals and mastering classes. That is not what we're on today. These are great classes. I also don't recommend that you buy these today. Eclipse says, I'm thinking about buying with my own money. Don't buy these today. I have coming up my Black Friday sale drops November the 1st every year, and all November long I run deep discounts on this stuff right across the top. Now, if it's your boss's money, by all means, click one of these today. I would love to take your money today, or his money today, not yours. But if it's your own money, do that. What we're doing here is if you go down to free membership, go down to free membership and click for sign up for all of them at once here. Click there and you can get immediately the How I Use a First Responder Kit, how to Think Like the Engine, and free SQL Constant Care Health More monitoring. All of this is totally free. Then that way you can go in and start watching the How I Use the First Responder Kit videos, and you can pick up after SP Blitz and SP Blitz First. Carl says, how about contacting your client, bringing us all along to see it in real time? You can guess that no client ever wants to air their dirty laundry publicly, which I always laugh at is sometimes you'll see people on Reddit going, hey, I want to do database work for free to get experience. No one will let you into the company safe for free. It's kind of funny how that works. But by all means, sorry about that. Go hop in there now. Go to brentozar.com, click training up at the top, and go into the free membership stuff. Wish me luck on working. Not that I ever need luck, in case the client's watching. But wish me luck working on their SQL servers. Y'all have a fun afternoon, and I will go off and solve someone's actual problems using the First Responder Kit. Hope y'all had a good time, and I will see y'all on the next webcast. Adios, everybody.